sorry.
Oh.
Hello, everybody. Trying it again. Thank you for coming to the Central Library today. I'm Kevin Alcuni, a librarian here in the Exploration and Creativity Department with the Los Angeles Public Library.
And I am Celia Avila de Santiago, the Senior Librarian with the Exploration and Creativity Department. And we're here to welcome you to this afternoon's LA Made program. LA Made presents Also on View. You can all feel free to clap and cheer very loudly here. Woo!
Yeah. All right. They can hear you. So before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to thank the National Endowment for the Humanities, our Library Foundation, and our behind-the-scenes staff for helping bring the LA Made programs to you. LA Made focuses on the diverse landscape of Los Angeles, highlighting the immense artistic and performance talent that has developed in the course of the city's eclectic history. If you'd like to see more of our amazing programs, please visit our online calendar at lapl.org/events. And for our LA Made programs, visit lapl.org/LAMade.
We would also like to take this opportunity to recognize and acknowledge the first people of this land, honor their elders past and present, as well as their descendants who are citizens of these nations. For more information on which territory you may reside on, check out native-land.ca. And just before we begin, we have a couple of housekeeping tips. Please silence your electronic devices so as to not distract our amazing, wonderful speakers this afternoon. Also, please take a moment to note the location of the exits at the back and the side of the auditorium, just in case an emergency should happen. If you are parked in the garage underneath the library today, you can get your parking ticket validated at the information desk in the main lobby, and the parking will only be $1 as long as you parked after 1 p.m. and leave before 5 p.m. And also, please no eating or drinking in the auditorium unless it's bottled water, and the bathrooms are down the hallway to your right if you should need them.
And now for today's amazing program. Yay. Celia, did you know that Los Angeles is home to more than 750 museums? More than any other city in the country.
OMG.
Also on view, Unique and Unexpected Museums of Greater Los Angeles is a new book from Angel City Press that celebrates 64 of the most fascinating and underappreciated local collections. Join us for a special conversation with author Todd Lerew, photographer Ryan Schude, to hear all about their journey venturing off the beaten path to discover and document all the diversity and wonder Los Angeles has to offer. Moderating this discussion will be Tom Carroll, a video journalist for the Los Angeles Times. And now let's welcome to the stage Todd, Ryan, and Tom.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello, hello. Thank you all for being here.
My name is Tom Carroll. Ryan, you want to say hello as well?
Howdy.
My name is Tom Carroll. I am moderating today's discussion. It's a great honor. Todd asked me to moderate. I said, of course. As Kevin mentioned, I work at the LA Times, and I was very excited initially to chat with Todd because of the book that he wrote and researched and has now published. We have a lot of overlapping interests. But I'm going to quickly read their own introductions that are in the back of the book. So, Todd Lerew is Director of Special Projects for the Library Foundation of Los Angeles, curating eclectic exhibitions and programs in support of the Los Angeles Public Library. He is a composer of experimental music and inventor of acoustic instruments such as the quartz cantabile, which converts heat into sound. He was winner of the 2014 American Composers Forum National Composition Contest and has had his work performed across the US and Europe. He received the 2022 National Outstanding Eagle Scout Award and has served as, and has served as a volunteer fire lookout at Keller Peak in the San Bernardino National Forest since 2016. Unfortunately, that fire lookout just burned down.
Keller Peak is no longer with us, but there's several other towers in the San Bernardinos, so we'll keep looking out.
He holds a BFA from Hampshire College and an MFA from Cal Arts and collects library cards, pictorial maps, and all-black postcards that claim to depict a certain location at night. Next, Todd, Ryan Schude, the photographer in this book. Many will see some of his beautiful photographs behind us. Ryan Schude is an editorial, advertising, and fine art photographer. Had it remained viable, he might still be working at the Rollerblade magazine that shaped his formative years, but a pivot into commercial photography happily funded his personal projects for the past 2 decades. often employing a stage narrative approach akin to a theatrical tableau. Environmental portraiture remains integral to his work, connecting him with artists, educational institutions, and just about any character willing to engage in the process. He recently moved to a small town just outside of Los Angeles with his wife, Agatha, daughter, Antonia, and mother-in-law, Jessie. Ryan teaches photography and media arts at the Ojai Valley School. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you all.
I speak for all residents of Southern California, and my thanks for you, both of you, for creating what really is a wonderful sort of decoder of obscure and often looked and forgotten about museums of Southern California. As Kevin mentioned, by your count, 750 museums or so in the greater Southern California area. How did you pick 64 to fit into this book?
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind words. It's an honor to see this project out in the world and to be able to share so many of these unique stories and to have been able to partner with Ryan to beautifully capture them as well. There's not really a magic formula for how they were selected. I will say that we wanted to ensure there was a diversity of subject matter, of geographical location, of communities represented, of the kind of whatever unique situation, because they are really all unique. Originally, when we first started thinking about doing a book, the plan was to have 100 museums featured. It immediately was clear that that would be too many pages, and it would be, you know, more expensive than the end product than we had hoped. So we cut it down to 75. But after 2 years of scheduling photo shoots and trying to coordinate and not hearing back from a lot of people we'd reached out to, we kind of just had to stop as the deadline was approaching, and this is where it landed. There's many, many more stories than what we have captured here that could have been included, but we're really proud of this collection that we have.
A earlier version of this book, you printed, released sort of a zine, specific museums of Los Angeles. There were no photographs in that version, just line drawings, sort of taking one object. So why did you want to work with Ryan for this iteration of the book?
That was a kind of a homemade artist book, I guess you could say. My friend Juliana Wisdom did beautiful illustrations. We kind of self-published and printed it. And it was done on the fly as an unofficial companion to an exhibition that we had here upstairs in the Getty Gallery all about collecting, called 21 Collections. I don't know if anybody got to see that show back in 2018. While that exhibition was up, I created an Instagram called Museum a Day and was posting every single day a unique museum throughout the greater LA area for the whole entire 6-month period, 178 museums in total. So there was always a kind of idea to do a more proper kind of coffee table version of this project. And I knew we wanted to have great photographs, but I did not know that I was going to be so lucky to have a world-class photographer such as Ryan partner with me on it.
And Ryan, let's click through some images, and then I'll ask you a question. So here we have the thing that really stands out with Ryan's photography is that, Todd, you've written a book ostensibly about spaces, but it really is the people that fill these spaces. And so, Ryan, I love how you take the people who dedicate hours and hours of time to make these places special. So can you talk to the choice of putting the people in the photograph rather than just of the space?
Yeah, it was something that I've been wanting to do for a while, not specifically about museums, but just going into small businesses or any institution where I felt had a unique vision and photographing the people behind them. And one of the reasons we got together was a huge coincidence in that during COVID, I had gone to the Villa Silvese panorama near USC. I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's half art, half installation. It's hard to explain, but it was all based around a 360-degree panoramic painting. And I figured, because of the COVID situation, they were just hanging out and not getting any visitors, so maybe it was a good time to approach them to get some portraits of the staff. So I had done that, and coincidentally, Todd's now wife was part of that. And so I had photographed Bridget, and she had made these amazing dioramas that are still there you can go check out. But so it was just kind of like Todd saw that I was already interested in a similar subject matter and then approached me to do the book. And it was right in line with both of our interests and just made sense.
But what about portraits?
As far as,
Why is that? It's kind of your thing.
yeah, I guess the exhibits are interesting to me. To me, all of the photos that I make are about the people more so than anything else. So the places around them become an interesting backdrop, but if there's no person in them, just a photo of an exhibit is less interesting for me. So this one in particular, you walk into this bird museum, egg museum, and it's overwhelming. It's fascinating. There's so much information, but throw in Renee, who is such a character, and especially if you're lucky enough to get him talking about the collection, it's a whole different experience. And so it has to be that combination for me. And so trying to capture that in one photo is very difficult and will never replace the real thing, but that was the goal in all the portraits. So,
By a show of hands, who has been to the U.S. Navy Seabee Museum in Port Hueneme? So I think that this is a great example because it illustrates something that I was thinking about. One of the things I appreciate most about this book is you are showing us spaces that, one, we don't know exist, and two, don't feel all that welcoming, either because, like, the Amy Semple McPherson parsonage, it's if I were to walk up there, I feel like I'm going to get scolded or yelled at by security. So I think the great thing about this book is that there are so many spaces that are somewhat, if they're not totally hidden, they don't feel public-facing. So can you speak to, one, finding these places that don't seem very welcoming, and two, sort of why you wanted to focus on a place like the CB Museum in Port Hueneme?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all places. Most 95% of places that are open to the public are not trying to come off as unwelcoming towards anyone. But the fact is that many of them serve a specific community. They're made by that community in many cases, and the only people who naturally would know about it, because they're not promoting really, are part of that already. So I think you're feeling that as an outsider, you get the vibe that it isn't necessarily meant for you. And that's a feeling that I kind of thrive on. I just love going into a world that I know nothing about and seeing what it is that's been so important, that's really made someone else's life meaningful. And hearing about that firsthand, I mean, that's an incredibly meaningful experience. And getting to see unique and, interesting, sometimes unusual objects or stories that, are kind of, you're not going to just hear about in any other way. I kind of got hooked on that, I guess you could say. So that's part of the great joy of trying to explore and find all these places. Yeah.
And Ryan, did you find these places that maybe are a little less known? Was there ever any pushback, like, don't photograph us, I don't want to be in the photos? Anything you had to deal with in that regard?
yeah, I mean, that's always been my experience with approaching, sometimes I'll just go to a restaurant that has a really cool look, and I'll ask to talk to the manager and say, oh, I'd love to do a portrait series with you and the staff. And typically there is this like, well, why? And even within the context of the book, where there is a clear reason why, the people themselves, they're not used to being photographed in that way. So of course, they're going to be a little bit timid, and trying to navigate that is, although interesting, presents a challenge, and seeing who's going to be the kind of representation of that space and how they're going to present themselves, and how do we make it interesting for the viewer that says, like, there's a reason that this person's in the photo. We didn't just grab any random person and stick them in there, but they represent it in a way that is appropriate for communicating what the space is about. So because they knew we were coming and they were expecting it, there wasn't necessarily pushback once we got there, besides one, which I maybe should remain nameless, that didn't get included in the book.
Well, now you have to.
You could also entice people to, if you wanted to go to a bar afterwards and chat over drinks. That could be the teaser.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stories that came out of this, but that one in particular.
It's true, their people could come after us, so we won't.
You
Yeah,
asked
this
about
is being
pushback.
recorded, so if
No,
forever.
everyone was super nice and into being in the book, except for one
Well,
particular.
there
instance.
were quite a few though that either wouldn't get back to us, or we had a few that said like
Right.
we're not interested in promotion, or they kind of didn't trust that we would actually finish the project and do anything with it. So
Well, I hate to throw this at the audience, but because 90% of the time when the conversation comes up, when you think of this, what is the first museum that comes to mind that should be in there? There you go. So right off the bat, the one that's not in there, and this was not the story I was talking about earlier, but they're not in there.
This is being recorded.
They opted not to be involved, so. No, but he said Bunny Museum.
yeah, sorry.
So.
The Bunny Museum. It's a great one in Altadena. You should
Love
all
it.
go.
Yeah. Anyways, there's fun stories.
Because I asked that question because this is one of my favorite photographs in the whole book. So here we are at the Flight Path Museum on the south side of LAX in the Imperial Terminal. I don't know, there's like a lot of joy in it. I think with so many of these museums, you have these people volunteering their own time outside of their working hours, oftentimes sort of laboring in obscurity. So it's just like, it's great. I think was a really smart and wonderful choice to have the people who make these museums in the photographs, because it really just gives so much more presence. I'm not sure heart to the photography, because when I think of guidebooks, I think of an architectural guidebook, and we see the building. We never see a human face. So I just, that is one of the things that really jumps out at me. And one of the things I appreciate most about the book.
Yeah, I mean, we could have done a very different project if we had been looking for archival images. You know, I'd say the vast majority of them would have had historic collections of photographs that are fabulous, that can really help tell their story in a different way. But we wanted to, that wasn't the specific goal with this project, so we're using Ryan's photos all the way.
What was the specific goal with this project?
I think we just wanted it to be a kind of original take, a kind of snapshot of what it is now, and then the essays get into the history and development and the context of them. Yeah.
So then what do you want people to take away from this book?
Well, I think it's a way of capturing their stories. You mentioned guidebook. I don't really think of it as a guidebook. I don't expect a lot of these places to get a huge surge of visitors. I mean, hopefully many of them do, but a lot of them aren't actually very accessible. They aren't open all that often, or they're quite far from where we are now.
The Westminster Historical Society?
Westminster Historical Society is, I think, open 3 hours a month. I mean, some don't have any regular hours; they're appointment only. So it's tricky, but they're no less important for that. And so I think it's an opportunity to record the stories, the places, the collections and the objects that they're trying to preserve the stories of, because most of these also will not be around forever. There's one or possibly two that have already closed that are featured. And if you look at this book in 20 years, certainly at least a handful more will be gone, but I think it's still valuable to have this recorded in this way that's not, oh, here's a place, it's kind of weird, here's their hours and how much it costs, because that's what becomes obsolete. Even if they're still open, they could have changed the details. But it's the context, the stories of the people, the places, and the things that I think we really wanted to capture to the best of our abilities. Speaking
of closures, the Zimmerman Automobile Driving Museum, which you featured in this book, went to print, and then about 4 weeks later they announced they were closing. So that idea has already proved prescient with preserving the history of this, like, what I love the Zimmerman. It was a really special place where you could actually get in the cars and ride around in them.
I mean, on that note, there are two people that we shot that have since passed. Albert Arcura from the McDonald's Museum in San Bernardino, who was a couple slides back. An amazing character. I think, oh yeah. There we go. That's Albert. Amazing guy. He's holding his memoir that he published called The Chicken Man with a 50-Year Plan, because he's the founder of a fast food chicken restaurant chain, Juan Pollo. He bought the property that was the original site of the very first McDonald's and created the museum there. You can, read all about it. But he kind of tragically passed at a pretty young age, and I'm just really grateful that we have his story, as well as Milt Larson from the Magic Castle, who was quite advanced in age, but he also passed away a couple months after we were able to do a shoot with him there.
So if this isn't a guidebook, is there a book tradition that this falls in line with?
What would you call it?
Well, you always talk about it as a coffee table book, and I think that is a nice way to think about it, because it could kind of exist anywhere in that regard. And hopefully the combination of something you could pick up and just flip through, and if something catches your eye, stop and read the texts. And I will say, after hearing Todd talk about all the places so well as he does, reading it myself for the first time once it was published, it was a whole new experience. Even though I had been to these places, I was super engaged and wanted to find out more. So I'm like just rifling through each one. I was like, I knew most of the stuff about it, but it's just put in a certain way that gets you excited about going. So yeah, I don't know if you can sum it up as a guidebook, but to a lot of people who I talk to about it, they are excited for that option to be used as such. And for me, obviously, the photos come forefront for my experience making it, but if I'm sharing it with someone, I'm not going to say, like, here, you got to see all these great photos I made. I'm going to say, you got to see all these amazing places we went to, and kind of share with the experience of what going to those places was, and hopefully they can pick a few, and then we can talk about them after they go as well. So I guess
And I just hope that some people who buy it don't only look at the pictures. So it's not primarily guidebook. It can be used that way, but I think we wanted it to be more than that, in really trying to go in depth into the stories and capture them.
Can you speak to the amount of time, years it took to make this book from the beginning? What was the seed, and how long did it take to actually get us here?
Okay, well, I spent the better part of a decade pretty much obsessively exploring and trying to visit. Once we started researching for that collections exhibition that I mentioned, I'd already probably been to 200 museums throughout LA, just because that's what I did on the weekend. But then I decided I should try to go to all of them. And then then quickly realized that trying to find them all would be a huge problem. Trying to figure out what should count was also a huge problem. But so basically that has been a decade in the making. After, when things started opening again after the pandemic, I think we probably met in like 2021. There was about 2 solid years of scheduling and doing the photo shoots and traveling around, and another year of writing and production. So the actual work on the book itself is about 3 years.
You brought up an interesting point of what is considered a museum. I know in your essay about JPL, you have this anecdote, people not really thinking it is a museum. So from your perspective, what is a museum?
Yeah, this turned out to be a huge can of worms. There is no definition for what constitutes a museum that everyone can agree on. Even museologists, museum professionals, there was a kind of hilarious controversy a couple years back in the International Council of Museums, where they tried to redefine it, and they'd come up with something with kind of flowery language that other members protested, and it made like national news, which doesn't often happen for the International Council of Museums. Historically, there are a couple kind of criteria, and I think that's the best you can do, is like there's a couple kind of telltale signs of whether something should be called a museum. And they don't have to have all of these. There's exceptions to every single rule, but is it open to the public? Is there a collection or some kind of collection of stories or objects that they exist to try to share with others? Is it, some people say it has to be a nonprofit. I don't think that's true. Children's museums don't collect. So there's all kinds of gray area here. At the end of the day, I kind of came to feel like for the purposes of this project, at least, it made sense to be more inclusive because people like to know these places exist. And I'm not here to be the gatekeeper of the term museum if there's an opportunity to include that and share another story. So that's how you end up with almost 800 museums, because college art galleries maybe don't consider themselves to be a museum, but at the next college over, they will say that they are, and they're functionally exactly the same thing. So I made the decision to include all of those. But yeah, there's a lot of gray area, and there's no way to be perfect about it, but you kind of have to let that part of it go.
I think, because I had the same question often while we were driving around, and time again, you said, well, they don't consider themselves a museum. And so, because I would be like, what about this place? And that seemed to be part of your criteria. But
It's part of it, yeah. And I used to go in and kind of test them, like, oh, is there a museum here? And see how they respond. And if they point me to a display, I'll be like, okay, that'll count then. So there's a bit of that.
I think reading this book, something that you and I had talked about briefly before, I think even in the time of Wikipedia, the internet, with Wikipedia or the internet, the burden is still on the individual to know and have a question about something to then look it up. And I think the power of a lot of these smaller museums, you can go in knowing nothing. Going to the Flight Path Museum next to LAX, I don't know a lot about aviation history, but I don't have to ask questions because it's all presented in a way by people that know a lot about these certain niches. So can you speak to the power of the little museum in the time of the internet?
Oh, I mean, the vast majority of the stories that exist are not online, and never all will be. And anyone who works in the library world certainly knows that that's the case as well. And it can't be. And even if it is it going to be discoverable? Just because something has been scanned doesn't mean it will be accessed and looked at. So you can't take any of that for granted. And I think just physically going to places is, like you kind of said already, it's not you can't replace that experience. Being at the McDonald's Museum in San Bernardino and looking at the thousands of Happy Meal toys from around the world that people have donated, you can read about that, but it's going to be different going to see it in person, or the weirdly preserved actual meals that they have in one display case. You have to be there to see that. This project took us to parts of the city, the region that maybe we wouldn't end up otherwise, and so you get a more holistic and more interesting kind of picture of what greater Los Angeles really is and what makes all these communities tick and interact.
What surprised you the most while writing this book?
I guess there's a few different ways to answer that. Most surprising, in writing the book, I had already been to all of the places that I knew we were featuring. But I guess what I hadn't done is deeply research them. So there were places where I thought I really understood the depth of the story, but didn't at all. And when you start actually, recording your conversation with the people who are showing you around, reading anything you can find that has been put out about them already, it becomes a so much deeper experience, like you were saying as well. And I think that has been something that's maybe it isn't surprising, but it wasn't something that I'd thought about necessarily, and it's been another aspect of this that's just been really gratifying for me, and I think has made the project more interesting as well.
And Ryan, same question. What surprised you the most about photographing?
Well, on the note of returning to them, because you had been to a lot of them, there wasn't a time when we came away from one where you didn't have something interesting that you noticed that you didn't before. And the same thing happened for me, like with Rubel Castle. I had been there twice before, started this project photographing the people who lived and worked there. And then we went for the book officially, and then I've gone since then. And every single time I go, it's a totally different experience, and you notice something new. Of course, that's a pretty, as far as like the scale of unique and interesting museums, I'd say that's pushing the limits of what's involved there. And but I don't think that experience would be much different no matter where you went if you were open and curious. So it is really about the little things you notice the second, third, fourth time you go. And so that's the other reason why you say, like, it's not a guidebook necessarily to go and just check it off your list and say, I've been there, done that. But like, if one of them you're really intrigued by, go many times. And so it's kind of made it clear to me that the ones that I like, I want to go back to more and more.
Was there ever a moment where you didn't want to continue working on the book?
Writing. Oh my God, I don't enjoy writing. It really was tough because it turned out that this was 64 separate research projects. And this is being recorded. I want to do these places justice. They have been very generous with us, with their time and trying to share everything. So I felt like I had to really know everything about a subject that I might have previously known almost nothing about before I could write anything. So figuring out like when to actually stop reading stuff, because I did have to turn this in and start putting a version of it on the page. Yeah, that was tough.
Do you think you're fun at parties now, or?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that, but
Todd's always fun at parties.
But
it
after
is
finishing
handy
this
because
book,
I'll be like, oh, where do you live? Oh, Glendora. Oh my gosh, you've got to go to the Rubel Castle. It does give you a better sense of this place, and it's a way to relate to people, and there's so many opportunities. I almost become a probably caricature of myself, because if like skateboarding happens to come up in any context, I'm gonna say, well, you've got to go to the skateboarding museum at the mall in Simi Valley and meet Todd Huber, because he's got probably the world's largest collection, and so it's, I don't know, maybe it's some kind of liability, but it's fun.
in your acknowledgments, you acknowledge Huell Hauser. I'm curious how much, like, I'm guessing, what's the overlap? Like 90% of things in here he did an episode on? Or?
No, but more than a handful. I should count. I don't know, maybe not more than 10 of the 64, I don't think. But yeah, he's obviously an inspiration for this kind of project. He sought out the unique, in some cases unusual places, and really wanted to celebrate the spirit in which they were being created and shared, and to highlight the people with a kind of honesty and earnestness that I feel a kinship to.
Yeah, in a weird way, as you said, this isn't a guidebook. This feels just more like in the lineage of Huell Hauser more than a guidebook does to me, because like you, he was going there chatting with the people who, sort of working in obscurity, relative obscurity, dedicating their life, and you're sort of shining a light on these people that are creating these spaces for us all to enjoy. I know there are some questions you don't like being asked, or at least not don't, but it's like, what's your favorite museum? What's the weirdest museum? There are a few of these things that, and what do you say to weirdest museum?
Yeah, what's your favorite? What's the weirdest? What's the most unique? The most unusual? The most obscure? These are tricky. Obviously, they're subjective, of course, and that's why they're asking me, because I've been to so many. But I struggle to find an answer to that, because they're so unique. There's so many that are singular, and that speak to me in many different ways. And for me, it really became more about the actual kind of journey of going to a place I hadn't been. The most exciting thing to me is when I hear about one that I wasn't aware of and find out that it's going to be open on Saturday, and I'm going to be there, because just that kind of feeling that I will be exposed to something that I didn't know about before is to me the best part of it. That's what's most exciting and most interesting. It's there are any number of incredible stories, and those are what we've tried to capture here. But in terms of the best, it's probably like, maybe it's cheesy, but it's the next one that I don't know about yet.
So that's a hard question to answer. Ryan, do you have a favorite photograph that you took in the book? Or at least one that, when I ask that question, comes to mind?
Yeah, this one, obviously, for the the production value you're not going to find at many other places, is in the top 5 of things when you're like, oh, you're not going to forget that horse at the castle. So, but even though the photos at Bhagavad Gita they're hard to convey the experience. When you were asking Todd the same question, I was thinking about like what was like when we walked away. I was just like, what was that? That's one you got to go to, because I don't know. It's just so and this is just, you wouldn't even know what that is, but that's a wax sculpture, right? The actual museum is these animatronics, and the experience of going through that with all its theatrical display and the audio is a real visceral experience. So if I were to come up with one to say of the whole book, go check that out. Besides the 3 that I always go back to, and it's the ones that you return the most to, again, to my earlier point, Rubel, Jurassic Technology, Velsavese, because I've been to those the most. They're, quote unquote favorites, because I know the most about them. I've been there, but this one I only went to once, and it sticks in my mind as the first, like, wow, this was why this project was so much fun, because I was exposed to something I never would have even thought to go to or didn't even know about beforehand. So check that one out. Yeah.
Todd, the nice thing is once you raise your flag as like the museum guy, then it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where people just do the work for you and say, oh, check out this place, check out this other place.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the best ways to find out about places that are not as well known, because people, I don't know, I'm hoping today one of you is going to come up afterwards and ask me if I've heard of a place, and I will not have, because that does still happen. And for years I was kind of associated with this quest, and people would often send me things, and word of mouth is as effective as ever. So, sometimes I'm just driving around and I see a sign and pull over. Sometimes I found it on Google Maps and I'm going to go see if it's actually there. But yeah, a lot of it's just from people who have a specific experience, because that's what so many of these places are, is like an individual's experience in life. And so the more that we can get this project out there in the world, the stories kind of attract other stories as well.
Speaking of a grand receptacle of museums, you created this companion website, everymuseum.la, and great website. You can sort of you can see in the top right, county, city, neighborhood, and just break it down by category, and you're continually adding to this.
Yes, so it didn't make sense to include the full list of almost 800 museums that I've found in the book. Even as a printed list, it'd be 10 pages and not usable, or, obviously you couldn't sort it or anything. So the idea was always to have a simple web page where they could all be listed. And I teamed up with a web developer and designer called Picnic Press, Nicole Jaffe, and she kind of took this aspect of the project on as her own labor of love in many ways, and built this beautiful interactive map. So we plotted every point, and it's really fun to play around with. But people often asked to see the full list. So I knew there had to be a way to make that accessible, even though it wasn't practical for the actual book. So we're really proud to have the companion website as an opportunity to share that. And obviously, if people submit things, I'm able to add them easily and try to keep it up to date as best I can.
Because before this website, it was just a Excel spreadsheet, is that correct?
Yeah, that's basically right. And there have been a few attempts at more comprehensive listings. There was a older book called The Museum Companion to Los Angeles by Borislav Stanic. And then at one point, LA County attempted to create a comprehensive list, but I think it was entirely crowdsourced, and it was just a mess. I mean, there were tons of places that weren't real, many things duplicated multiple times, lots of things that were long gone. So yeah, there wasn't, that I could find, a decently comprehensive listing anywhere, so we wanted to make that aspect of the project more available.
What's something important I haven't asked you about?
Well, the Museum of Jurassic Technology, before anyone else brings that up, this is by far the most common question I get. That place has been getting all kinds of attention in its 35, 40 years of existence, but everybody that goes still feels that they have kind of personally discovered it in a way. That is the feeling you get there, and it's very much about that sense of wonder, so it's no surprise, but...
But you included it.
I would go, yeah, I would never hear the end of it otherwise. And also, of course, my wife Bridget built some of the displays and worked there for a number of years. I knew about that place before I ever lived in Los Angeles. I made what I would consider a pilgrimage before I officially moved here as well, and have been back many times, and there's nothing else like it.
To be clear, you appreciate the museum, you just have grown a bit tired of constantly hearing about it? Or just
No,
you just want to know, you want people to know there are other museums beside it?
Yeah, I think the latter. I'm happy to talk about it always. In many ways, if you're interested in unique, unusual, uncanny museum experiences, it is the best. And so it has earned that reputation, I will say. But it does come up so often that it's kind of comical to me. But yeah, I think again for good reason.
Well, it's 45 minutes into the hour. I think we have a microphone set up over here, and Kevin has the microphone. If you have a question for Todd or Ryan, we just ask that your statement ends with a question mark. That's all.
Hello? All right. Who has a question?
Hi, I'm guessing all of us have been to small town museums here and have all experienced the particular people that work and volunteer there. And it seems like you maybe have a higher tolerance for those conversations that we've all gotten caught in. And I'm wondering how you stay engaged and sort of, I guess the negative question would be is like, what is your tolerance with these fanatics of like how much you can listen and where do you find yourself cutting it off? But I think the more empathetic question would be, how do you like keep yourself engaged and then like, yeah, how do you like keep listening to these people?
Oh boy. Yeah, it's true. You can get trapped or feel that way, or maybe aren't as interested or enthusiastic as the person who's sharing. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of an amazing energy, and there's a way if you really don't have time or you've got to go eat, you can talk your way out of it. But I mean, if that's the worst that's going to happen, like, bring it on. I mean, there's one, I think, no, I don't know if we included it in this set, but in Santa Fe Springs, the Hathaway Ranch Museum.
It's in here.
When you go there, I just didn't know if it was in the slideshow.
Yeah, you're right.
When you go there, they will say, how much time do you have? And if it's less than a few hours, they're going to be very disappointed because that's how long it takes to see that place. So I don't know. Sometimes you just have to be kind of aware, open to the possibility of getting more involved in a place than you thought you would. But again, that's what's so kind of exhilarating and fun about it to me. I mean, so yes, I have a very high tolerance for that. I grew up in rural South Dakota, and you mentioned small town museums. Very many of these places, though they're in greater Los Angeles, they feel as though they're representing a small town. And many of them are historical societies that really do represent just that specific neighborhood. So yeah, I'm not as interested as everybody who represents them and wants to share everything about their thing. But it's always a kind of fun exchange. Do you have a perspective on this?
Well, I just wonder if the person who asked that knows Todd. Okay, so there's no exhausting his curiosity on the subject matter, and if anything, it's going to be flip-flopped, and they're going to want to gather before he will. So, and that was a great thing for all of us involved, because I could just stand back and glean so much information from watching those conversations unfold. But yeah, to his point, very high tolerance.
And to your credit, you're generous. You say it in a nice way, but there are you're pretty good about including if that's going to happen. There are multiple instances throughout the book where you sort of allude to the fact that go with a flexible schedule potentially. Next question. Bob up front, or
Come down here.
My question is, what has been the smallest museums that you visit, and what has been the biggest one?
Okay. There's a few that claim to be the smallest. I haven't really thought about what's the smallest one actually featured in the book, but there's,
Physically, or?
I guess, well, yeah, small in what sense, first of all. But if we say physically, I mean, there's a little museum in South Pasadena that's literally about the size of a shoebox in someone's front yard. So that probably wins. In Ventura, there's a fire museum that you can't enter. You just look in through the window. It's a tiny room. Probably the smallest one in the book is the Rancho Cucamonga service station on Old Route 66, and it's a beautiful building, and the people there are extremely dedicated, but what remains of the historic structure is, probably like 20 square feet. The biggest, other than, well, this project is specifically meant to highlight the lesser known, the museums that don't get as much attention. So obviously the Getty and the Huntington have like more acreage than most, but the Southern California Railway Museum out in Paris is more than 100 acres as well, and they've got all the old LA Red cars and giant steam engines, and they just have like a whole dedicated crew of volunteers every Saturday who are like restoring and running these machines, and this is their world, and it's really kind of a playground.
and you can ride the trains.
And you can ride the trains, and
You can drive them too.
yeah, I think that costs extra, but it's true, you can.
Bob.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to having this book on my coffee table and looking at it. But I wondered, being aware of 750, is that what you said, museums?
Well, there's 795 on the full list, but some of them are questionable. So
Well-
we say more than 750.
So is there any, for both of you, is there any aspect of Southern California culture that you think is important that you have yet to discover a museum that's devoted to it that you think should have a museum, or do you think we've pretty much exhausted the panoply of things that are going on here?
Not in any way exhausted. I mean, I think everyone here could probably open their own museum to whatever it is that they're interested in and dedicated to. There are definitely communities that are underrepresented. I mean, even the Latinx, Chicano community there's a couple bigger museums like MOLA in Long Beach. There's a Latino art museum in Pomona, but there could be a museum about mariachi specifically, or of lowriders, and the list can just go on and on. So yeah, it's definitely not exhaustive.
Todd actually answers the question in his afterword in the book. Other questions?
Yes, I want to ask the opposite of the first question. You went to a place where you were not particularly welcome, and how do you guys get in? How do you get the people to talk to you and let you in?
Well, I think I mentioned there were places that were not interested in participating, and we didn't get in. So, you know, we weren't trying to force this on anyone, and there were a few that just said we aren't interested in promotion, or you know, that wouldn't get back to us. So, yeah, okay. Somebody mentioned the Bunny Museum. This is the one that comes up second most often after the Museum of Jurassic Technology. It's a husband and wife. Every single day for the past 30-something years, they gift each other a bunny-related object. So they have by far the world's largest collection, 40,000 bunny objects. And I talked to them early on in this project, and Candace, I think, unfortunately, they've had people reach out who have expressed an interest in covering them and sharing their story, and end up, you know, coming out with pieces that essentially mock them for being weird. So, you know, they've had a bad experience. That's a very unique case. But yeah, there's all kinds of, there's a wonderful world-class collection of Chinese art in the Chen Gallery, which is based in a corporate, I think, vitamin-like office building in Torrance. And I believe it might be just like a tax shelter kind of situation, like some of our bigger museums arguably are as well. But they straight up told me, you can tour it, but we don't want any promotion. Like, do not spread the word about us. We're good. So, yeah, you never know.
So there's a question over here. Oh, sorry.
It feels like kind of a lot of these places have been open for like some amount of time. What's like one of the most newly opened museums that you were able to visit?
One of the newest that was featured in the book, we had an image here as well, is the Compton Museum of Art and History. They only opened in, I think, last year. So, yep, there's Marquel and Abigail and their 3 kids. It's a family operation. It's under the umbrella of Color Compton, a nonprofit they'd established earlier in the same strip mall right across from the Civic Center in Compton. And, you know, there's so many incredible stories that have come out of Compton, artists, musicians, the Compton Cowboys, and there wasn't really a space within city limits telling those. So when we heard about them opening, we're like, this is a fantastic opportunity to be able to highlight a more recent effort as well.
You kind of answered this a couple of questions ago, but you had a good example of this, but did you encounter any museums that seemed like kind of a scam or a fraud, or like they were in bad faith and shouldn't really be considered a museum? And you don't have to give me a specific example. The one with the vitamins was a good example.
Well, I'd consider that a museum. It's still on the list. The area that I would lean into in response to that is the so-called Instagram museums. And typically they're temporary pop-up locations, so I can kind of ignore them anyway. But the kind of big one that started this trend was the Museum of Ice Cream. And there have been many copycats since then that are essentially a series of backdrops for social media where you pay much more than any other kind of museum for the privilege of photographing yourself against whatever environment they've created. But there isn't, most often with these, there's not any kind of deeper story. There's not a community that they're representing. There isn't much to it beyond that kind of photo setting. So a lot of them have museum in the name, but I don't really count those personally.
Hi. On the topic of quantifying, qualifying what is a museum, what are the, I guess, search terms that are on the periphery of what a museum might be that I can go home and look up? So something that's open to the public that is, I don't know, a collection, something that's like what's not a museum that is still cool to go to?
Archive, I guess, would be a kind of peripheral type of collection. There's a lot of special collection libraries. Many libraries have historical collections with a dedicated room within their facility that would count. And actually, this library we don't consider a museum, but we have all kinds of fantastic historical collections. and great exhibits. And I mentioned that I would be sure to plug this. So my day job is here, full disclosure, working on exhibitions. And since you're here, I hope this is totally unrelated, but we have a great exhibition upstairs in the Getty Gallery on the second floor off the rotunda called No Prior Art, all about invention and art and science. So I hope you'll be able to stop by and check that out as well before you go. Yes, I don't know. Did I touch on that at all? One in the front here.
My question's very simple. Is there plans for a second book?
Not at this time. I won't preclude this project from evolving into some other form or continuing to share these stories, but no, not right now. Speaking of the book, I do want to mention I see some folks from Angel City Press back here, so I want to shout them out because they are the ones that made this possible. So let's hear it for Angel City Press.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Also, if you know anyone in Sydney who wants to do a book about museums around there, I'm happy to explore options. So.
Well, Todd, Ryan, thank you both for chatting today and sharing everything that you learned while making this wonderful book.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
And thank you to the library and LA Made.
Yeah. Hold on. One
so-
last thing.
Now, Kevin and I are going to talk about our favorite museum, the Museum of Jurassic Technology.
Have you heard of it, Todd?
Just in case.
JK.
So thank you all so much for coming. The Museum of Jurassic Technology actually is available through our Explore LA offering, free with your library card, as are other museums if anybody is interested. So thank you all so much for attending today's LA Made program. Before you leave, please check your yellow wristbands. And if you have a star on there, you've won a free copy of Also on View. Huzzah!
Yeah.
You can collect your book out in the lobby where Todd and Ryan will be signing copies.
Also on December 15th, our next LA Made will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the magazine Giant Robot, so we hope you can join us for that.
And if anybody wants to pick up a copy to be signed, the library store is selling them today. So that's right down the hallway, and you'll see it on your left. So until next time, thank you all so much for joining us. The success of LA Made and literally all of our library programs could not happen without the support of you, our patrons. So we thank you so, so very much. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy.